the dead Brotherhood soldiers, a note in a freezer that would reference the FBI as an X-Files Easter egg, holodiscs with so-called
What's up, everybody? Welcome back for Week 9 pregame talks. Back here with UFL Talks. Glad to have everybody joining us today. We're working it down. Final 2 weeks of the UFL season, so I know there's a lot to get into, especially as we're heading into playoffs. So far, it's been a ride. It's been an action-packed ride. You know, these last 8 weeks has really flown by. I think there's been a lot of fan service. I think really, the league is doing well right now. How that looks when it comes to the numbers, that's going to change as time goes on. But like, they're doing good. The league is, I'm not saying we're doing great, but we're making good steps, and it starts with and the league. I know, last week we went over. Uh, UFL got its summer showcases planned, which means they're at least thinking to the future. So that's a win for the fan, at least, because we know that, hey, we got something to look forward to for 2027. Other swinging around the league, of course, we'll hit it again. United Bowl, that'll be June 13th in DC. I wonder if you'll see the center of this graphic. Tamu is injured and out for the remainder of the season. So what's going to happen here? I feel like there's a strong influence to pick DC just as a result of the fact the best team might end up hosting their own championship. But then when we look back at really the biggest news, kind of this latter half of the season, the UFL starting to lean into private ownership as opposed to startup league-centric ownership. So it seems like Echo Investments, the owner behind the Oklahoma City soccer team, might also be, and it's not clear what level of ownership they're going to have, 50% stake, 100% stake, but it seems like they will at least be buying into the league, whether it be through the team or through, general ownership of the league. We'll have to see how that all works out. But really big news, and it marks an interesting storyline we'll be tracking this offseason on how many investors really get invited in over the year. Otherwise, big news this week, a little bit of a spring football star. Sal Cannella will be making his return to the league. Really was signed on Wednesday and is expected to play this week. So Battlehawks signed him, so it's expected that they're thinking a playoff run, and what's most important is that relationship with Luis Perez, the Spring King himself, is back in action. So I expect there to be a lot stronger offense when it comes to our DC team, or I mean our St. Louis team, with the addition of our two Spring Kings. Otherwise, a look back and kind of the biggest story of Week 8 was really the Fort Hood game, and I think this was a lot more interesting than people would think. Fort Hood got to bring out all the families. It was really, really awesome event. Probably one of the better attended games for the Renegades all year. And not often do you get to see, on the military base, on base, we're having a professional football game, and not only is it broadcast, but also we get some really good fan participation. And the Storm did well. They earned that win, but ultimately a very interesting experiment for the league going into a military base. And I get it, you're not losing much either because attendance in Dallas not doing great, but the Renegades in Fort Hood really, if nothing else, it was a great experience for everybody else. But to turn back, look at how things went for Week 8. We'll start with that Fort Hood game, reviewing our Friday night football game. Score 31-24. So the Renegades, of course, could have done better. They really needed a win. They're on about a 4 to 5, almost 5 game losing streak at this point. When we look at the time, it was a pretty even game, I would say. At the end there, Orlando did start to pull away with it, that 367 yards. That makes the difference. That's where the score comes from. 61 plays compared to 51. You're getting almost 11 more plays. So, that has an impact. But where it really comes down to, you look at your pass yards, 238 to 123. The strong suit of the Renegades is their quarterback and their pass attack, and that's not been the case so far this year. And as we see in the chat, the Storm have been surprising, and I think it's a testament to Coach Beck. He really knows how to prepare his offense. But where I will say some alarm bells are ringing is in their rushing yards. And ultimately, the Renegades had a way better game rushing than they've had all season. But that 129 yards, you start getting into the playoffs, you're going to see some tough offenses. And then what happens? So if we look at our passing, I do think Plummer is slowly and quietly making his case for an MVP season. I've been saying it a couple weeks now, but 238 yards, no tuds, no interceptions either. So that's good. Austin Reed, though, really the strong suit of the team. 3 touchdown passes, really, really good performance. Though their offense completely rides on him. So he's throwing the ball all the time and, opening up some risk for the team, especially when they're trying to go back-to-back winning games, doing drives, taking up 10 minutes of each quarter on each offensive drive. Then we've got rushing, which comes in. We've got Jack Plummer. Pretty good job, and this really all came off of one large drive. Really amazing performance. Especially the one I think was about 45 yards. The one rush that he had. But then you look at the Renegades, if they can keep this up, I'm very impressed. Merriweather has really kind of stepped into that number 1 role, kind of relieve the work from Day. Then you look at her receiving, you got Rowland, 9 for 91. That was a good showing and pretty consistent to what we've seen all season. And then Badger and Camper. So Badger, you'd expect to have a little bigger performance, but not exactly has had that. And then Green and Stoops, kind of newer receivers, and I think the Renegades offense has been solved. So it ain't causing anybody trouble. 236 pass yards are NFL numbers, so that is a very good point. And if you think about it, they're passing to, I'm not going to say bad receivers, but there's equal competition between the receivers and the defensive backfield for these teams. So it can be a little difficult, for some of these quarterbacks. And as we look into the rest of the games from last week, that's where you'll really start to see some of the issues arise with how the defense. It's more about the defense than it is about the quarterbacks. It's the adjustments that are being made, play to play or series to series, are far more impactful than the offensive adjustments being made when we look at just general, like, quarter to quarter, or if we're looking at the offense. Like, if we look here, this is a little look ahead at one of our later games of the week, but the defense swarming, and this is what was happening consistently throughout the game. It may not have been how the game ended out, but ultimately the defense has really been impactful this year, and it's been giving the quarterback some trouble, and I understand why. It's not easy to win professional football games. Then we'll look at our next game, Defenders versus the Kings, 30-33, and this was a back-to-back game, and everyone really expected DC to pull away on this one, though the Kings They came to play the last 2 weeks, and there's talk that maybe DeLillo in the trade, maybe he was giving away the offense, giving away the signs, giving away basically everything they had. And that, I don't know that there is some truth to that, but I mean, there's got to be some explanation here. And I'm not going to say that DC just started, muddy in the bed uh, as time went on, or as the seasons went on. I think it's more like there's something going on here. Some reason the Kings were able to do so well. And if you look at that trade for Bean, DeLillo goes over, and then all of a sudden they face each other twice in a season, and you know, 2 wins for the Kings, and they're in the playoff hunt and doing well at it too. So you look at time of possession, Kings did have a little bit more yards though for DC. For some reason, they just couldn't get into the end zone, and then also, you know, it can be difficult. We had some turnovers, 4 turnovers. You can't win a game throwing 4 tuds or turnovers. I mean, uh, while there were 2 from the Kings, that's really bad, especially if you're trying to make a push into the playoffs. You can't be having these many turnovers. And as far as it stands for DC, there's a lot of questions to be answered in that locker room. Who's going to step up, especially when you look at Tamu taking an injury, leaving the game. Um, is Sanders going to be the answer, or are you looking at Bean? Who are we putting in there? So there are a lot of questions there, especially like who's going to be chairing that offense as it moves forward. And then for Rodgers, had better performances the last week and the last few weeks, but ultimately lately there's questions at quarterback for the Kings, and DeLillo is the backup, and he's been the backup for DC. Is he going to continue to be a backup, or will they give him a shot? Hard remains to be seen right now. It seems the team is kind of rallying behind Rodgers and coaches as well. Then when you look at rushing, Valladay really making a name for himself this week, and then Jackson, I think there were some adjustments against Jackson that were not quite considered. And then Robinson and Wheeler here. This is a really impressive duo, especially if they can keep this up moving forward and Wheeler gets a few more. Because remind you, Wheeler did get himself 4 or more touchdowns earlier this season. So really, really impressive work out of that offense, because where they started and where they are today in week 9, they have a competitive offense, especially when it comes to the rushing and passing game. But there are still some questions, especially when we get into our receivers. Lucky's been consistent this season, not so much last week. Winstead as well been very good. And I'd say Winstead, Black, and Jackson or Lucky are really, those are going to be your main receivers moving forward. And I think they're about to start scheming more plays to appease them. And then Ezu Kanma, really kind of a new name in the DC offense, and has kind of, at least lately, really emerged to be one of the stronger offensive options for them. Then when we look at Powell, he's been consistent year over year, but is receiving some defensive pressure lately. Then you look, let's see how Gill did. 4 tackles, not bad. 1 sack, so he's adding to his list, and we'll check that out in a little bit. But ultimately, the story of this game is really that, DC, they have questions, especially now that Tamu's out. Well, for one, they were able to put up points, and I think if you're Coach Harris, you're not feeling terrible about that fact, because if nothing else, you've got something to rely on. Your backup quarterback play was consistent. It was decent. I would say there are questions, of course, moving forward, especially if we're going to try and maintain and make a push to the championship. You got home field advantage going into the United Bowl. So how is that adjustment going to occur? Are you going to put in Bean? What's going to happen there? And I will be looking to see exactly what occurs. Sometimes teams can fall apart. Lose your starting quarterback. You lose your MVP candidate. Lose your, leading player, really, and kind of not only captain, but also the leader of the offense, leader of the locker room. That can have a major impact on these teams. So as that occurs, really makes you wonder what does that team have ahead for them, because it could be a tough road. And then looking at our final Saturday game, which was really the shocker of the week, and I don't think many expected it to go this way. We have the Gamblers visiting the Battlehawks, and most people quite surprised. I was myself, and those that watch this game, the scoreboard doesn't tell the story. I'll tell you that much. There is questions everywhere. Gamblers, arguably the worst team in the league, but for some reason go into the hardest location to play in the league, the Battle Dome. And don't get me wrong, fans been lacking lately in St. Louis, but they go in and get the win. And is it because of the quarterback play in St. Louis? And there's so much inconsistency right now at the leader of that offense. How did this happen? And I think that was a lot of the questions asked on the way home in the locker room this week. How can one of the better teams, arguably going into last week, one of the best teams in the league, how can they falter to arguably one of the worst? And I think there are some questions there, but maybe it's more a sign of the Gamblers and the fact they're starting to figure it out. Just took them 8 weeks to do it, kind of the whole season. So if you look at that, total yards, only 200, and they got the win. So they were, effective. But St. Louis, 365 yards, and you only put up 16 points? What's going on here? Those are questions, especially if you're trying to make a push to the playoffs. And, the Battlehawks have been consistent in the playoff discussion every single year. And you lose to the Gamblers. Maybe it's a bad week. I won't talk too much into it, but in week 8, you can't be having bad weeks. It's too close to the playoffs. Especially in pass yards, you're going to throw 170 more yards than them, and yet you're still going to lose. What's happening there? Rushing yards, they only beat you by 5 yards. So, it didn't come down to the rushing yards. And I get it. 2 turnovers can stop you. DC turned the ball over 4 times and put up 30 points. You turned it over twice and put up 16. So I'm not going to say turnovers lead to more points, but, something's not adding up here. And if you're Coach Pohl, you got to be really wondering what's ahead for the team. But I will say, John Reese Plumlee coming in, I appreciate the fact they've got themselves some backup with Talia going out. But Deckers, that I would argue is the most valuable player to this team because he's in there. They got competent quarterback play and they can be effective. Perez, great passer. We know that he has been, but he's not quite adjusted to the offense yet. 2 interceptions, 64 QBR, kind of rough performance. But one, why is your quarterback throwing the ball 47 times in a game? As a coach, you're almost setting your quarterback up to fail, wreck their stat sheet. Those are a lot of questions that I think should be put at the coaching staff. 47 pass attempts is a lot. Opens yourself up to a lot of risk. No wonder you have 2 interceptions. Then looking at the rushing, Jarvion Howard was kind of leading the league almost when it comes to the rushing attack, but not so much this week. 31 yards, 29, really poor performance when it came. It was a defensive battle, I won't lie. But you need, especially going to the playoffs for the Battlehawks, you need a more competent offense. But for the Gamblers, at least there's hope. And this is the 3rd time they've got to win, and this is the 3rd time I've said that at least we have hope. But if they don't win this week, it's over for them. So their season is riding on quite a bit. Then when we look at receiving, McBride, and I think this relationship is newly forming between Perez, but I expect McBride to really, really start to see a larger ball share. And Butler, I think, I'm not going to say it's a personality issue, but I foresaw there being a little bit of discrepancy between those two. But then when we get into week 9, week 10, is that relationship going to develop? What's in store for those two? So I do think there's hope, especially with how Butler was playing previously. But Moreno, Crop are really stepping in to be a consistent threat for the Gamblers. So really an impressive performance out of the Gamblers. And ultimately, the story of week 8 is the Gamblers. And anyone that says it's not just doesn't know the league like they should, because, man, it was an impressive showing. And to go into St. Louis and get that get that win. And then Peta really doing well. Been consistent defensive player of the year in spring football. Back at it again this year. I wouldn't be surprised if he has a compelling case for this year. And then when we look at this, I know I was showing this earlier, but you got Deckers here. Oh, There goes a sack, or maybe that's Plumlee. Might be Plumlee, actually. But regardless, this is what you're seeing. The Battlehawks, their strong suit is their defense. The offense isn't great. 2 picks out of Perez, but 300 yards is good. But the defense is what's keeping them in games. And if they can capitalize a little bit more on offense, maybe there's hope for them. But there are still a lot of questions for the team as it stands right now, especially when we look at what the future holds. I would say Peta, getting his Defensive Player of the Year last year, been doing really good this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if he gets this or more this season, because those 5 wins that the Battlehawks have, those are a result of the defense. The offense has been, don't get me wrong, trying, and they're keeping them in the game, but the defense, what you see right here, this pressure coming to the outside on both sides and then collapsing. Pocket just absolutely collapses. That's what's going to happen across the league for whoever they face. It's been anyone they go against, that rush attack from the defense has really, really been impactful for them. And then we look at our final game of the week, and this was a game that I think disappointed a lot of people, I won't lie. 14-3, relatively boring. You really like to see your final game of the week have a lot of action. I get it's a 1 o'clock game. You never know what's going to happen. But pitiful performance out of the Aviators. And I think at this point, they may be the worst team in the league. So I have a lot of concerns. Especially going into the season, they had the Panthers roster, the Michigan Panthers, who made it to the championship last year. They didn't have the whole roster, but they had a good portion of it, and yet it never really came together for them. You thought some of that team cohesion may have remained. Was not the case, unfortunately. So if we look at Columbus, really controlled the ball for most of the game. Could not score a point to save their life, though. I don't know if they. I know they're dealing with some changeover at the kicker position, but at what point do you acknowledge that you're playing professional football? We need more than 188 yards in a game, and I know their defense is tough. I won't say it's not, but you're running 61 yards or 61 plays, and you're averaging about 3 yards a play. So not great. But also not great out of the Stallions. But, they weren't trying as hard against the Aviators. But it is, the Aviators have a strong defense. Don't get me wrong. And then their passing game, could be better. But where I'm more concerned is the Stallions' passing game because they bring in DTR. I understand he is a more competent quarterback. But when it comes to offensive production, we haven't seen it. So I don't know that I'm that optimistic, but there is hope for the team, of course. There always is. But 61 yards when it comes to rushing, pretty good performance comparatively to the Stallions, but ultimately, there's a reason they're 2-6. They have really struggled, and then when you add in the turnovers, which are a weekly occurrence, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. When's it going to happen in the game? When's McClendon going to throw some interceptions? 2 is kind of his average as of late. 150 yards as well doesn't exactly offset the 2 interceptions. And when you control the game, when it comes to time of possession, why is it that you cannot score? But a bigger question is more, why can the Stallions not score off these interceptions? Why are they not getting these takeaways and really, capitalizing on them? And I think it's more a result, I don't know if it's coaching, but there is some disconnect for the Stallions, and it's really kind of made it tough for them. What do you know? Consistent with these teams. Their quarterback in the top 3 rushing. McClendon 18 yards. You're taking beatings every time you get the ball. And McClendon, there's hope for him in this league, but I don't know if the team's setting him up for failure, or if he's just not built for the occasion. But Tawx, really should be getting the ball more. Zamir White, after last week, should have been getting the ball more. But I get it. You tried 10 times and you only get 10 yards. It's what are you going to do there? And then Davis Price may be the future when it comes to the rushing attack for this team. But all in all, their offense on both of these teams, I think, there's a lot of room for improvement. When you come to receiving, Mickens really starting to step back into that number 1 receiver role, even though it's pretty distributed across. And DTR, I feel like, starting to develop those relationships, but not quite there yet. Then we look at Martin, 33 yards, pretty good performance as well. Then we've got Wells. Then we look at the defense. Tony Fields, really good performance. I think making a strong case for Defensive Player of the Year as well. So keep an eye out for him as the season goes on. Then when we look at the Stallions defense, Crowder, of course, been a consistent talent for them. And then Tizino, of course, always makes his presence felt. Overall, I think this game, wasn't our best, but I think there's room for improvement. And then when we look ahead, I think the Kings, testament to the fan base. Really impressive how they showed out last week, and then this week really going to be their last home game. So not that the season's over, especially if they make a push deep into the playoffs, but it's been a good show out of the home field crowd when it comes to St. Louis. Then a look around at our stat leaders. And this is something I was kind of telling us to monitor as the season went on, this slow creep and crawl of Plummer chasing Reed, and now he's overcome him. Only by about 50 yards, but ultimately that's something to watch because that gap may start to grow. And then if you look in that number 3 spot, you're going to see Tamu, and that's not going to grow anymore because he's out for the rest of the season. So McClendon may make his way up, be the 3rd highest passer in the league, which will... I would say, punch his ticket back in the league for next year. Jason Bean's still on the list, hasn't played in about 5 or 6 weeks. So that just is a testament of kind of the talent. So I wouldn't be surprised if DC moves into that direction as the season goes on. Then when we look at passing touchdown, Reed leading this list, probably will continue to lead this list. And Plummer, he's a more dynamic quarterback than what we're seeing across the league, especially when it comes to passing, scoring through passing. Not so much the Storm's style. They want to get down there and then give it to the running back to run in, or the quarterback, of course, get a little sneak. And then McClendon, Frost, DTR, all these other folks, I don't expect too much movement. But then rushing yards, Jarvion kind of leading the league. Corbin right behind him, Jackson as well right there. So really we haven't seen like a breakaway talent when it comes to our rushing backs. Maybe that's a testament of the offensive lines and the fact there just isn't enough. But there is hope. Maybe we'll start to see, some of these rushing attacks take off. But then when it comes to touchdown, Deion Jackson's, I expect to really get a stronger road or riot, getting road a little harder, especially with Tamu out, and the fact that, that passing attack is going to be a little more inconsistent. And then Valaday, look out for him. He's a rising talent on the team, and I expect him to get a greater share of the attempts moving forward. And then Wheeler and Merriweather, also impressive showing so far, so I wouldn't be surprised if they hop up this list as well, especially if one of those teams has a good week. Then for receiving yards, Mickens going to be leading. Butler gets about 150 a game when he catches the ball twice. So I wouldn't be surprised if he kicks his way up there as well. Then we've got our receptions. Roland really doing well. Impressive showing, not too many yards. It's really kind of been a short game attack. Mickens, though, number 1 receiver on that team, and was doing very well in the beginning of the season, but then with the quarterback change, that relationship, I wouldn't say it's stagnating, but it's just at a very, very slow simmer. Then we go to our receiving touchdowns. Butler from the Renegades, and then Vaughn's doing pretty well, been kind of holding that top spot for most of the season. And then Scott might step up as we go. But then when we get into tackles, Tay Crowder, really been a consistent talent. And then when we get to Tony Fields, really, I think both of these names are those to watch, especially as we get into the offseason. Tony Fields might be the first player signed to the NFL. And then Cam Gill, 8 sacks. Really making a name for himself, and don't be surprised if he's one of those first names out as the season goes on. Then I'll look around at our players of the week. Our special teams player of the week, we had Tanner Brown, 2nd time this season he's got it. We had 4 field goals made, 60-yard long, so he got the 4-pointer. Really good performance. Wouldn't be surprised if he gets a shot across the NFL at some point this upcoming season. Then our Defensive player of the week, Tay Crowder, as I said, really been doing well. Was leading the league in our tackles, if we recall. 65, so 4 over Tony Fields. Really good performance. Don't be surprised if he gets a shot as well. One interception this week, you want to have a linebacker can get a takeaway for you. And then I think arguably the most deserving and our first one of the season for the quarterback, we've got Jack Plummer coming in, 308 total yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, really, really good performance. And it was a unique game, as I said, at Fort Hood. So all in all, really something to be proud of. And then when we look back kind of at some overreactions based on the old last week, first one we got is Louisville hosting a playoff game. Could be an overreaction, but I think off of how they performed, and I don't know if that's just against DC, but they may make a case to be the 2 seed in the league after it's all said and done these next 2 weeks. So I'm not going to say this is an overreaction. It's unlikely, could happen, but as it stands right now, not so much. Then we've got DC not clinching a playoff spot. And I think this one is kind of a shock, and I'm not going to say it's an overreaction either. But as it stands right now, I want to see more, but they put up 30 points last week. So I'm not too worried about them. Then when we look at Houston, they may make a run to the playoffs, but I think that's an overreaction. They had a good week last week, don't get me wrong, but so much has to happen for them to go from 3-5 and into the playoffs. 2 wins, they definitely get up there. They go to 5, and not many other, most of the other teams are sitting at 5 as well. So they could, and off a 2-week win streak, I would think, could easily do it. But as it stands right now, I might call that an overreaction. Then our next one, Coach McCarron being a champion again in Alabama. His first spring football championship. Don't know that this will happen. We'll see exactly what occurs. But could be an overreaction, especially based on how the team's been performing in a 14-point showing out against the Aviators. I think I'm calling that one an overreaction. Then when we look at our final one, kind of our player-focused overreaction, I think, or the overreaction is 3 linebackers going to the NFL. That's probably not an overreaction. They've been pretty good this season, so don't be surprised if they really make a run, especially deep as we go. Then when we look at kind of our best week at our best week in sports, I'm gonna have to give it to Houston. You go in to the Battle Dome, you get a win. It's a tough place to play, and how the team looked really good. You dominated the game against one of the better defenses, and really impressive. Though, who had our worst week in sports, I'm going to say that's Repo. Not only did the star player of the league, but also the best player on the best team, I wouldn't say best player, but one of the best players in the league, and also the leader of the DC Defenders goes down, and that was the favorite going into the playoffs to go to the United Bowl. And especially, I'm not going to say that he did this, but I think they may have chosen DC because they thought that DC would make it. And I can understand why you do that, because you want that home field crowd in the playoffs. Not exactly what happened for them, so kind of tough. But, if they make it deep into the playoffs, it's a testament to the coaching. So we'll see how the adjustment occurs. But take a look at our viewership going into week 8. So still sitting at our average about 631,000, which is pretty good, especially when we look into how that compares to hockey, which is sitting around the same viewership level as the UFL at this point. So pretty good. We're getting added sponsorships, and you're starting to see more of those ads come online. So pretty good showing so far, especially when you look at just the general growth. I understand 3% is the most impressive number, but that is a number to be proud of. Then when we come to the most alarming fact of the league, we're getting into the attendance. And it's been a consistent downslide, unfortunately. We did see a little uptick out of St. Louis, but they did lose. So how are the fans going to be feeling about that? And if we recall, we've got 5 home games, 5 away. So Dallas is done, basically, even though their last home game wasn't a home game. 5,000 fans, I won't lie, they were basically playing in a high school stadium. But where I'm really concerned is Birmingham. How do you go from 18,000 fans down to 4,000? I get it, the team had a rough start to the season, but there are some serious concerns out of the Birmingham fan base. This is exactly what we saw last year, and it is kind of worrisome. Then you look at the Aviators, you're sitting at your base, 8,000. We'll see how they come out this week. Maybe it'll be better. It'll be an actual true weekend game. But when you look at Dallas, what's going on there? An alarming, your base is 5,000. Better than the Stallions, which is 4,000. Then you look at DC. Really, I think that's the most shocking of this season because they really were one of the stronger fan bases. In that 12,000 range is kind of where they're at, even higher. And we've been seeing them in the 7,000 range, so kind of disappointing. Then when you get into Houston, this is where really it's been a struggling fan base. Only about 4,000, topping out generally with 5,000. They did have a good showing for their home opener, but also when your team loses consistently, not many people want to turn out for the game. So it affects it. But then when you look at the Kings, they're sitting 4-4 right now. Good, really good showing out of the fan base. 14,000 to start, and then sitting about 10,000. Those are numbers you can build off of. Those are consistent. Those are things that you really want to keep on site. And then when you have the Storm coming in, they're sitting around 9,000 there flat. Could be some room for improvement, but then when you look at St. Louis, they continue to be really the top of the league. So what if we just look at this in week 8, 21,000 attendees at the Battlehawks home stadium, the Battle Dome. If you look at the Gamblers total for the entire season, same amount of games, 17,000. So over the entire season, less fans have showed up to Houston than what showed up for one game in St. Louis. That's alarming. So I am not the only one ringing the alarm bell. You're starting to see the media pick up some of this story because, that has been really the one downside of the league so far this year has been the attendance, and it's been a consistent downward trend. And that's where really, I think with a lot of Repol's argument was that you were going to see a lot more, attendance out of these venues that they were choosing, but that's not been the case. And I get it. Maybe it's because you moved the stadium so people are, not aware it's in their area, so you're not getting that local fan base. But man, you got problems. You look at St. Louis down 22%, Dallas down 33, DC down 32. These are alarming numbers. These are really, really alarming numbers. Overall, you're down 14% across the league. Not great. It's probably because you moved to a bunch of new fan bases and you haven't got so many, as big a reach as you did previously. But the problem with that is all the new teams have better attendance than most of the old teams. So there's some questions there. Then a turn around now to our power rankings. We looked at our attendance. We looked at our viewership. So how are things ranking up across the league? Of course, we're going to have the Storm in the number 1 spot. That was expected, especially after their win last week. Only one to clinch the playoffs. I feel like it's justified. They've earned it, especially with the performance of Plummer. Battlehawks still in number 2 after losing to Houston. It's literally indefensible. I don't know how you can do that. DC with Tamu out and off of that loss, I get it. They scored 30 points and back-to-back losses and losing your star quarterback. I don't know how you have them in the 3 spot either. Kings, though, they look good. They look pretty good. Offense was, rough, but they look good. They were putting up points, so I'm into the Kings, and I feel they may deserve a higher spot in this ranking. We'll see how that shakes out after this week. And then the Stallions, I think, pretty justified placement for them. Renegades probably should be under the Gamblers, I think, off the performance last week. And then Aviators got to be sitting at the bottom. That's what you're going to see across most of these lists. This is RJ's checking in here. He's got the Storm, number 1 spot, going to be the same. Got St. Louis and DC, same spots as the official. That's where I'm not exactly agreeing. Birmingham in the 4 spot, I think, is not justifiable. Louisville should be in the 4, if not higher. Houston in the 6. I would say they should be in the 6, possibly even in the 5. Dallas, though, in the 8. I'm not going to disagree with it, but I do think they are better than Columbus. So I hope Columbus wasn't moved up by virtue of Dallas being bad, because I was 3 points this week. You got to be real here. Dallas at least was able to put up a good offensive showing. So I don't know exactly how we'll agree with RJ's completely, but generally he did have some decent justification for his placements once we get into it here. Big thing. I get it. The Renegades are on a generational losing streak right now, but they are still a decent team. Really had some good odds to win the title, not so much anymore, unfortunately. Then we get to the Aviators, plus 3,000. I'm hoping if you're placing bets on them to win the championship, call the number, my guy. Please. Gamblers, I might like the plus 7.75. Maybe. Kings in the 5, I don't know how they moved down after winning against DC, but Birmingham, yeah, I got some questions for RJ on his. And then we'll look back at James Ernst, take a look at his pressure. So we've got week 8 here, and Aviators sitting in the bottom spot. I think having the Gamblers in the 7 is foolish. I know they're in the last, but you can't just move them one. You got to be, you got to do these lists based on what the actual power rankings are. And I think the Storm, having them below the Battlehawks after losing to the Gamblers, you've got to be kidding yourself. Defenders probably should be there or a little lower. Stallions, I think, should be behind the Kings. A little bit of a horse race we've got going on in the theme of the Derby. And then Renegades in the 6 pot, probably where they really should be, probably the most justifiable placement for them, or if not, the 7. And then we compare that to the official. The big change there is really in the placement of the Kings and the Stallions. Other than that, it's pretty much the same and that number 1 spot. And I understand why you might put the Battlehawks in there, especially when you're looking forward, but it should be based on like that performance last week and kind of where we're going from here. Then thankfully, kind of on week 8, so we'll take a look at our tiers. So we'll look at week 2, who's reigning supreme. We had the Renegades, so pretty good performance. They got their first 3 wins of the season, haven't won since. Then we look at week 4. This was really the ascendance of the DC Defenders and kind of how they were doing very well through week 6. But then week 7 and 8, they've really fumbled. So when we look at kind of where we're at today, I don't know that we have a team reigning supreme. So starting off with DC, and looking at some concerns, we have Tamu's out. Who's going to steer that offense? Is it going to be Bean? Are you going to lean to a quarterback that's shown that talent? I know it's sloppy, but Tamu was throwing 2 interceptions a game, so it might be something you want to look into. So I think as it stands in week 8, they are down bad right now, and really a lot of concerns for them, especially moving forward. They were able to put a good performance last week, but what do we have moving forward? Then you look at the Renegades, really bad offense at this point. It's just, I don't know if someone figured out their scheme, but there's just been no adjustment, but they are truly one of the worst offenses. Went from the best offense in the league to absolutely the worst. So that is unfortunate. Yeah. And on the comment of the plus 75, decent line for him. We'll get into that in a minute. Then our final down bad team, the Aviators. When it comes to the Aviators, it's a coaching issue. I'm 99% sure they have a coaching issue. When you have 2 head coaches, you have no head coaches. So when you got Haley and then you got Ginn going back and forth all the time, who is the offense? Who's leading that offense? And I think there are a lot of questions for him, especially, literally hard to watch. And of all the teams, the Gamblers and them have been hard to watch. Last week, it wasn't the Gamblers. It was all the Aviators. And then our team that could be better is the Gamblers. They did get the win last week against, the Battlehawks. So that was an impressive showing, but they need improvement. And, maybe Deckers is able to play the rest of the season, but man, if they win out, there's a chance for them. But as it stands right now, it's unlikely. Then our balling teams, we got the Stallions, and don't get me wrong, they're doing good with DTR, but there hasn't been consistency. And then when you add in the defense, really been a problem for them. And I don't know if this is an offensive line issue. I know we saw that earlier in the season, but there's been a lot of problems when it comes to just that offensive consistency and their ability to really get into the game. Then when we get at the Kings, their offense, I think, also has some consistency issue, but it's more about finishing drives. You know, their kicker, two times he's been player of the week when it comes to special teams. That's not because he's kicking the ball super far. He's doing it because he's putting up most of the points in the game for the team. And that's good to have, don't get me wrong, but that offense really needs to pick things up if they want to go deep in the playoffs or even get there. Then we look at the Battlehawks, quarterback play. I mean, Perez did good. Don't get me wrong, 300 yards, but there's something about the offense. I don't know if the relationships haven't developed, but there is some sloppy play coming out of the backfield there. But also, you're going to throw for 300 yards when you have 45 passing attempts. So that's tough for them. Then our final team, our almost great team. I didn't put them in Supreme because I do think they need some improvement still. And it's really just been about complementary football. You know, they're playing, you know, their offense and their defense seems very disjointed. Ultimately, like, I don't know what the relationship is like in that locker room, but I have the alarm bells are ringing for the Storm. So they get into the playoffs. Is it going to be like every single other year with Coach Beck where they lose in the first round? I hope not. Trust me, I hope not. But as it stands right now, you know, there are some alarm bells there. And then looking ahead now to our Week 9 action, we got our Friday night football matchup, which will be DC visiting the Storm. So really kind of some of our league leaders matching up. Tamu is out, so we'll see how this game goes for him. But our Saturday showdown, we'll have the Stallions visiting the Aviators. Should be a good game. Rematch of last week. Hopefully the Aviators can put up more than 3 points. Generally, the Aviators win on those back-to-back games. So maybe they're able to make some good adjustments. Then our Sunday starter, not our Sunday seconds, but our game of the week is going to be the Renegades visiting the Kings. And I think this will have a lot to say about the playoffs. Because if the Kings can get another win, they're into that 5-win total, and they can clinch if they win in Week 10. So they're not going to be riding on or depending on other teams to lose. If they control their destiny, and of all these teams, the Stallions and the Kings really are the ones that control their destiny. The Renegades, it's starting to become an uphill climb for them, so it might become difficult. And then our Sunday seconds, or true ones, will be a rematch of last week with the Battlehawks visiting the Gamblers. And you know they're going to be wanting to get revenge after that loss. So don't be surprised if we see some good action coming out of that game. And ultimately, I think there was a lot to be excited about. And especially when we look ahead, especially to our Friday night football game, been the most consistent product. Be in Florida, so it should be a good night. But I do wonder what's going to come out of this game. Especially on the defender side. You know, your running backs are going to be carrying a lot of the load. Tamu's out. Probably won't be passing too much. And then how does the Storm adjust? Plummer's been playing great. Roland's been playing great. Overall, you know, the Storm are looking dangerous right now. And I think for the defenders, this has been kind of a nightmare matchup or a nightmare 3 weeks for them because I think they thought that the Kings would roll over for them, and that was not the case. And now if they don't win this week, you know, they could be out of the playoffs next week if things don't go their way. So hopefully that doesn't happen. But when we look ahead, you know, should be all right for them. And I do think the big storyline kind of coming out of this game is going to be the Storm. If they can get a dominant win here, they're going to be a favorite going in the playoffs, and don't be surprised if that happens. You know, there's a reason the Storm are sitting in that one spot across most of the power rankings, including my own. Then we look at our Saturday game, our Saturday showdown. We got the Stallions at the Aviators. 3 p.m. start time on ABC. Our ABC games have been doing well. It's kind of been the strong suit for viewership. Unfortunately, it was the lowest scoring game out of last week, and I don't know that it won't be that again. But this game comes down to the quarterback play, DTR and McClendon. who's going to do better, and whoever does better, that's who's going to win this game. And if the running backs can get involved, that may also throw the game a little bit. So depending on if either team is able to get more than 50 yards out of one running back, they're winning the game. I'll tell you that much right now. Can't tell you which one, but I can tell you that might happen. And the biggest story coming out of this is going to be the Stallions. If the Stallions lose, their playoff hopes are basically done. But if they get that win, they stay in the race. And, I'm just going to say this. They're basically playing playoff football right now. And Coach McCarron, that's what he knows best. So don't be surprised if they make a run. Then our Sunday starter, we'll have the Renegades at the Kings. This is, as I said, is really going to do a lot for the playoffs and give us a lot of clarity, because if the Renegades lose again, that will be a 6-game losing streak for them. Pretty embarrassing performance. But if they win, what's going to happen in the playoff race? So Kings could possibly fall out, maybe, of the race, or at least a good spot for it, but the story of this game is going to come down to the offense of both these teams, because if the Kings are running on all cylinders, they're going to blow them out. And if the Renegades are running on all cylinders, how they were in the first 3 weeks, it'll be close. But as it stands right now, I do think you're looking good if you're the Kings. But ultimately, every time I've said that this year, I've been surprised. So don't be shocked if Coach Newshies will dial something up. But the Kings look good the last 2 weeks. Don't get me wrong. That defense really looked good. And you get, the sack leader on your team, that has an impact. Then you look at the Battlehawks at the Gamblers, 7 p.m. This should be a good game for us, our Sunday seconds. And ultimately, I am excited to see what this game has in store for us. There could be a lot of impact on the Battlehawks' playoff hopes if they don't secure a win against the Gamblers. And the Gamblers were able to get the win off the first match, but on this rematch, who's going to make the adjustment? And I wouldn't be surprised if the Gamblers do. Both teams are very well coached. So I think this will be a very, very good game. And I think all that, all that's riding on this, is a little bit of the Spring Kings legacy. Depending on how Perez do, might be, especially if he can get him into the playoffs and get him a shot and give himself a shot. Think about it. Perez makes a shot, makes a push in the playoffs, maybe goes in, wins the championship. That's a pretty good way to end your story. Maybe go into coaching. But there's a lot riding on this game for the Battlehawks and the Gamblers. If they win, they're in. They lose, they are eliminated, I believe, from the playoffs. So we'll see what happens for them. But so far, looking real tough. So looking ahead, we can line up for us. Saturday should be a good game. Hopefully, the Aviators put up more than 3 points. But really look to this Sunday starter to really be what should be a competitive match, especially with the Renegades trying to get a win. Then we kind of look ahead at our DraftKings preview, looking at the Storm. With the Defenders, Storm given 2.5. I like that. Probably the best bet there, but don't be shocked if it's a 1-point game or if DC does win. And then we get to the Stallions at the Aviators. That's plus, so Aviators getting 1.5. I hope it's closer than it was last week, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's not. So, you're probably good taking the Stallions at the 1.5, but you never know how the week shakes out. And then for the Renegades, it's at the Kings. Kings given 1.5. I think that's a good bet. Personally, I do. But taking the Renegades money line, that's a shock. I mean, the Renegades could get a win, and if they're going to do it, the Kings have been vulnerable. So it's kind of a question of, who's going to take advantage of that vulnerability, because the Renegades have also been vulnerable, especially on offense. And then Battlehawks at the Gamblers. Gamblers getting 3, probably a best bet. Yeah, I figured. It'll probably go, I don't know. Honestly, most people would have taken the Battlehawks last week, but Gamblers pulled it out. So don't be surprised if they do it again this week. And then looking ahead, kind of the big name or the big story around the league this week has really been the focus on the playoffs and kind of the race that we have. And technically, like, all teams mathematically have a chance to make it in. But so far that, we don't know that that's going to happen. But Repo is kind of giving us a little look ahead, not only at the championship game, but generally just kind of let us all know it's not over yet. But looking ahead at kind of what we've got for the halftime show, we've got Bad Bunny, 50 Cent, and the Beatles. So not sure how we're gonna do the Beatles, but 50 Cent or Bad Bunny could be a good time for him. But ultimately, Repo's just trying to get some discussion around the league, see exactly what might be of interest to some potential fans. Because if nothing else, it's a free concert. Some people may just tune in for that and then stay for the game. Then we got our 3 playoff spots do remain, so the Storm have clinched. But the question is, who's gonna get more of those last 2 spots? Seeming like the Battlehawks, if they can win, they're in. So we'll see exactly what is ahead for them. There are questions that remain for the team. And then we got DC. We'll see what happens there, especially with the new quarterback coming in. But these last 2, the Kings or the Stallions, it's really going to be a race. It's between these 2 teams for that last playoff spot. And depending on who wins this week, we might have a better idea. Because as it stands right now, the only team that's clinched is the Orlando Storm. So in the hunt, and really the teams that if they win, they're in. The Battlehawks and the Defenders, but then the Stallions, Kings, they win, they're in the hunt still, but definitely in that position they win out the rest of the season. Either of those teams could make it. Then you look at the Renegades, they might also, they could, if they win out as well, they could make a strong case to get in as well. But how they've been performing, 5 losses in a row, we'll see how it goes for them, but it's been a tough season for them, the Gamblers, and the Aviators. So technically they've got a chance, but as it stands right now, we're not sure that it's happening. And then when we look at kind of an expanded look at our clinch scenario, so DC, they technically, if they don't win, they can still clinch a playoff spot if Birmingham loses. So a lot riding on Birmingham, but ultimately I'm sure DC would rather just win so that they know that they are in for the playoffs. And then you look at the Battlehawks, St. Louis, they win, and DC or Birmingham or Louisville loses. So there's kind of a lot riding on the other teams in that circumstance. But if Birmingham loses, DC's in at least. And then if St. Louis can win, they'll be in as well. But the surprising thing is the Stallions could even clinch. And this is what I think is very surprising because you need an Orlando loss, a Louisville loss, and a Houston loss. So DC would have to win. So if DC wins, technically they're in the playoffs as well. And then Birmingham, if they win, they would take that 3 spot. So then the 4 spot is going to come down to between the Battlehawks and Louisville in Week 10. So there is kind of a developing dynamic at play as we get closer to the playoffs. Then we look at Gridiron's predictions. He's got the Defenders, Storm, Battlehawks, and Renegades. It's quite possible the Storm are the only ones that make it in. So hopefully that doesn't happen for them. But, there's a lot of, the season has changed drastically as we went on. And then kind of a look ahead now at what I'm thinking our power rankings are looking like kind of heading into Week 9 for the MVP of the league. And really, I think our number one and most likely to get the win is going to be Jack Plummer. He's done well this season, and I think really been a key to the success of the Orlando Storm. And then Hakeem Butler, I think, just off the few catches he's had, he's changed the dynamic of games. And as these last 2, matches go this season, if he makes his presence known, don't be surprised if he's in the running. And then Austin Reed, this is more a result of the touchdowns. He's been a good performer, and the entire offense rides on him. So don't be surprised if he also makes a running, but that's going to require them to win out the rest of the season. And then our defensive player, and often they don't get enough credit, but Peta could make himself a little run to the end there, and that would be surprising. But may require a few interceptions, couple sacks. So I'm not saying it's gonna happen, but it could happen. Might be a little bit of an overreaction. Then in our 5 spot, McClendon, if the Aviators win out and make a run to the playoffs, quite possible McClendon really becomes one of the better quarterbacks across the league. And then to finish up, a little look ahead at the week ahead and kind of our lines, and we look at our money lines here. A little bit off by about 15 on each, but generally the difference is the same. Storm, I think probably the safe bet, but don't be surprised if the defenders come in and shock us all. Then you look at our Saturday matchup. We've got Stallions. I think probably safe money takes that. Um, then our Sunday starter, Renegades, not a favorite. So I agree with Vegas, but at the same time, that may be a smart one to take. And then the Battlehawks, that's exactly what I think you can expect. Then if we look over at just kind of some of our props and such, starting off with our Friday game, we've got our favorite. Well, first the spread's 2.5. We already went over that, but not a bad spread. Probably should take the Storm, but could be closer than that. Over under sitting at 44. More than likely, it's going to hit the over. Our favorite for score is Corbin and then Deion Jackson. Deion probably getting one. Corbin more than likely might get one, but Valladay is who I'd like as a little bit of a sleeper, and maybe even Powell. Hard to say what that passing attack looks like. Then we get into our passing. Plummer's sitting about 275. We don't know who's going to be playing quarterback for DC as at this moment right now. But 275 for Plummer is attainable, but I'm probably taking the under. Powell for 100 and Roland for 100. Take the under on both of them. Jackson for 80, Corbin for 80. Jackson could get the over. I'd probably take the over on Jackson, but the under for Corbin. Then we look at our Saturday showdown. Our line is 1.5. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not that close, but the over being 43, I'm probably taking the under for point total. Then when it comes to the TUD scores, we got Mickens as a favorite. Probably unlikely. I think I might avoid the TUD choices. DTR, though, would be a good choice, I would think. Probably the safest one. He's at plus 170. That's probably your safest choice in the matter. Then you look at passing, DTR sitting at 275. McClendon is not an option, so he may be benched. We'll see what happens this week. Martin sitting at 100, Mickens sitting at 100. Probably take the under on both of them. Odds are they won't get 50 for the rush yards. You got Lovett at 80, Davis Price at 80. I take Davis Price. Lovett probably not. So there is some hope. Generally, some just by the lines, you can kind of see how the games are gonna go. 1.5. See, this Kings Renegades matchup is really the ones that I think holds the most intrigue going into this weekend. And then for our TUD score, Merriweather is our favorite. I think that's probably justified. Probably take that one. And then Robinson and Vaughns. Probably not taking Vaughns, but Robinson, there could be an argument. Tough to say, though. Then we look at our passing props. We got Rodgers sitting at 250, Reed sitting at 275. If Reed and Rodgers play well, don't be surprised. They could hit the over. Very, very, very classic. And then we've got the receiving props. Tariq Black sitting at 75. Tyler Vaughn's at 100. Take the under on both of them. Then for our rushing yards, Merriweather at 80. James Robinson at 80. Probably taking the under on those. Then when we look at the Battlehawks and Gamblers, we've got line at 3, probably good there, and then the over-under at 42. Probably taking the under. I'd probably take the over, actually. Then for our favorites to score, we got Jarvion at 120, Jalen White at 130, and then Butler at 130. Probably take Butler and Jarvion. Maybe not Jarvion. Probably Butler, though. I think he's due for one this week. Perez, 275. Probably take the over. He's going to throw for a bunch of yards this week. Moreno Cropper for 75. If Deckers plays the whole game, he could hit that number. So I might take the over on Moreno. Butler at 100. If he catches the ball twice, expect him to, kind of take over not only the rushing yard leader, but can easily change the way a game goes. And then we got Jalen White and Jarvion Howard. Sitting at 80, probably take the under on both of them. Then we'll do a little chat roundup while we can. Looking at the Courtney had a little thought about the MVP. I do think the MVP race will probably come down to the wire. So it will be a question of what's going to happen, especially through these last 2 weeks, because the race could be decided through that. But as it stands right now, there are some questions arising from. I'm gonna say your favorite's got to be Plummer, but as it stands right now, depending on these last 2 weeks, there's a few people that could kind of make a case for themselves. And then Austin Reed knows he has more turnovers than a bakery. He does know that. Like it's in the defenses are living in his mind rent free, and it's really preventing the offense to be effective. And then looking at this next one, Austin did throw 5 picks in one game and then threw a few more the next week. Probably not. Might be in the running for. He could be in the running for defensive coordinator. That's a well said burn on him. The man does know how to create some interceptions, just not for his team. But I appreciate the compliment there, Courtney. And generally, I appreciate the participation throughout the season. We're winding down here, but we will have some playoff action and may have a little bit of UFL talks on tour for you and some other new developments that we might be bringing you after the holiday. But as it stands right now, I just wanted to say thank you for joining us. Very appreciative to have you here and love having you in the discussion. And ultimately, as we look ahead to week 9, I do think you can expect some good action. So for this holiday weekend, don't be afraid to pull some family in, maybe grow the fan base a little bit. But thanks again for joining. Have a wonderful holiday weekend. Please enjoy yourself and, of course, be safe.